said, if it is true, they would just forward the money onto the county, so, anyhow, that was legit.
A couple things, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to also welcome Larry to LAFCO. We did have a good session yesterday. You know, it really, that body focuses on the future of the county and in terms of how we can maybe eliminate some of the obstacles that exist there, you know, to those who would like to see the county grow. So, and Larry, I think, will make a great addition to that. A couple things of a note. One of the things that LAFCO is focusing on, based on some new state laws that have come into play in the last couple of years, is that we have to kind of define and figure out how to deal with what they call them DUCs, D-U-C, disadvantaged or unincorporated communities. It's kind of a new vernacular, and really what they're looking at, it relates more to cities than it would be to the districts, but little pockets of residential and urban development that are tucked in and around, you know, you might say your urban core, that are not part of a city. In some cases may be in the sphere of influence, in other cases may not be. And so they're wanting to have those addressed. A lot of times, you know, if the city was to annex some of those kind of areas, there's no financial advantage to it. The cost of providing additional services to them that exceeds by far whatever revenue that would be available from those entities as they would be contributing to it. So for the most part, they sit on the outside. A lot of times these folks don't want to be part of a city. They live close enough, maybe they enjoy some of the commercial benefit, but as far as they're concerned, they live on a gravel or dirt road. They don't have to have curb gutters and sidewalks and all the other things that city folks are forced on them, and so they don't want to be included. In some cases, cities don't want to include them. But anyway, at the state level, they're trying to address, I guess it's a big issue down in the urban areas where you have all these little pockets that are scattered around. And so LAFCO will be struggling to try to define how that relates to Lassen County. So it's going to be an interesting discussion, and I know Larry will enjoy being a part of it. We had some folks down from Big Valley to talk about the Big Valley ambulance situation, or the non-existent situation now. They're in the process of doing some organizational stuff, and then we bring it back probably in January, putting together a program that will lead to maybe a ballot measure next June to be able to vote on. We want to kind of form, it will be basically a bi-county, MoDOT and Lassen County combined, at least a portion of kind of an ambulance service area. They're still trying to working with the assessor's office to try to determine the assessed values that are involved with the properties that would be affected in terms of how they would outreach. Whether Lassen County would have a bigger share or MoDOT County is still to be determined, but one or the other will have to be the lead in terms of sponsoring this particular initiative. But it is very clear that whatever happens, it's going to require kind of a joint action by both the MoDOT and Lassen, LAFCOs, and the MoDOT and Lassen board. So Aaron will be in the middle of all that, but I think the board needs to be aware that formulating a new Marty in your counterpart in MoDOT County, probably if you haven't already tuned in to, you're starting to make some progress on that. That was shared with the commission yesterday. And then the third issue, and this is really for Tom's benefit, to get referring to him as the new guy. And finally, I think Larry or somebody says his name is Tom. So, anyway, but the Madeline Fire District and the issues there, apparently the supervisor in the likely area that lets up to that, and they do actually provide some services. And Mr. Benoit did indicate that he had talked to Mr. Hammond. That is an area that I think Tom will want to spend some particular attention to, and anything the rest of us could do to help you. The good news is a district that has revenue because it predates Prop 13, so there is revenue stream that comes in, but they just don't have the critical enough mass of population to actually operate a kind of volunteer fire department or fire services. So they're kind of dependent upon what can reach down from MoDOT County, from the likely area, but obviously those folks, if they're going to provide coverage into that area, they need to have some resources available to them. So one of the things that LAFCO will be working on is how do we, you know, take some of the revenues that are resources that are available and exist and transfer them by contract or whatever for them to be able to provide. And the question is just how far south into Lassen County right now the coverage that goes out is going to be a smartphone station terminal. We've had, situations where they can respond to even farther than that into the campus itself. So that one was placed kind of settles down and you have some attention. That's an issue that, LAFCO is going to be working on. And finally, the last thing I wanted just to share and report to the board, that I'll be attending the NORTEC meeting in Reading tomorrow and Thursday. And NORTEC is the Lassen County Joint Powers Authority that Lassen is a participant in, that oversees the administration of the federal job training fund. So the monies that they receive filter down to, in our case, the Alliance for Workforce Development, which is a 5-county entity that is operated, and they're the ones that operate the one-stop center at Lassen Career Network over on Chestnut Street. And so the issue they're going to be dealing with, I just want to make the board aware of right now, and it's an issue that has kind of come to the forefront in the last few months, and it deals with the governance. They went through a massive reorganization of the Workforce Investment Board they call the WIB, and the entity operates as kind of a joint partnership between the WIB, which has about 30 individuals scattered around. It used to be a county-based WIB where each county selected specific delegates that served from labor or business or from the educational field. But now they, under the federal rules and stuff, half the WIB has to come from the business sector, and then the other half is basically scattered amongst veterans and labor and educational and EDD and those kind of categories. But they had in place and had for many, many years operated with an executive committee, and this executive committee was kind of like this little shadow organization behind the scenes that kind of apparently took care of the business while the big things were done by the WIB and the governing board in joint session. And the issue really kind of boils down to is the fiduciary responsibility. And so in essence, what we've been able to determine is, for the most part, the financial, ultimately the financial determinations that are made by this kind of like an unelected body that really doesn't have any tie to the various 11 counties now. It started out to be a 9-county organization back in the, actually 7 counties back in the early 80s, and grew to a 9-county organization very early on, and in recent years has added a couple more counties, Nevada and Sierra County. So it covers a wide geography from basically Nevada County and Truckee all the way over to Delaware County on the coast. So my concern is that if we don't get the fiduciary responsibilities resolved, that the governing board has the responsibility, what I feel it does is it puts counties at risk. So if there is any sort of mismanagement of any of the program dollars, that we could find ourselves being handed a bill that we have to fork over. And if that's the case, I would be in favor of, and will be coming back to the board with the suggestion that we consider withdrawing from the Joint Powers Authority, not be an active member. It doesn't mean that our providers would be affected, because that's administered by a separate contract from out of the area. They would continue to provide services to Lassen County. We just would not be an active participant in the governance structure, especially when we're being told that the fiduciary responsibilities lie with this side group. So that's going to be the issues that are going to be hammered out on Wednesday and Thursday, and we'll give you a report at our next meeting. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Okay, with that, it is 10:16. The next item is the Williamson contract. I do hold a contract, so I'll be excusing myself and turning it over to our new Vice Chair, Mr. Walker.
Thank you. Bear with me, sort of got thrown in the deep end 10 minutes ago.
Just be careful what you wish for.
I'll probably call you for a little bit of, correction if, I procedurally step out of bed. Welcome, we'll take up a 10:15, public hearing on Williamson Act, and,
First item would be to open the public hearing.
thanks.
You want to declare the public hearing open?
Public hearing, declare open at 10:18. We'll start with the staff report then.
Mr. Chairman, Board, the item before you is really, despite the size of the packet, really simple. Sorry. This is Galen Norwood, Chief Planner for Lassen County, planning and building, giving us that report on behalf of my director, Maurice Anderson. Excuse me, I think I'm seeming to be losing my voice. Anyway, it's really rather simple despite the size of the packet. It's about Assembly Bill 1265, which is legislation that the state put in place to allow you, the board, to, if you wanted to in any years where you receive less than half of your foregone property tax revenue, to use 1265 to reduce the term of Williamson Act contracts to 9 years, from 10 years to 9 years, or 20 years to 18 years. That relates then to a 10% reduction in the benefit that contract holders are receiving. Nothing else is on the agenda. Non-renewals were reported at the October 8th meeting, and we're following directives that the board has given previously through resolution 12050. So, like I said, 1265 would allow you, if you utilized it, to reduce the term of Williamson Act contracts and regain 10% of the revenue. Contract holders would reduce their benefit by 10%. This would result this year in approximately $80,000 revenue. It's been reported by the auditor that $77,000 is in the current budget because 1265 was enacted last year. There's an email from the auditor on page 11 of your packet. So if you choose to implement 1265, you need to, the first thing that's laid out on the agenda is make a finding that the county received less than half of their foregone property tax revenue, and then you conduct a public hearing. So, I would ask if you want to proceed to start getting testimony and conducting the hearing to make that finding. There's information starting on page 8 from the auditor and the assessor indicating that the finding can be made. If you wanted to enact it, there's a resolution in your packet, and there's a notice, a draft notice that we would record if it were implemented. If you don't want to implement it, which is item 8, I think it is, or 7, you don't have to do anything, just don't adopt the resolution. Again, this is for 1265 only, which is the term of the Williamson Act contracts. It's not in regard to non-renewal or anything else. So that's all I have unless you have questions.
Yeah, maybe I'd just like to ask a couple, ask you to maybe highlight a bit of the information in here just for the benefit of the audience that isn't privy to the whole staff report. Maybe, can you just talk briefly on the financial impact, if you will, and the financial, a little bit about the ag report, about the dollars generated in the county through the ag community?
Yeah, at the request of the board, we included that in this packet. That study was about, and the ag report, the study that Chief of State did was in terms of non-renewing all contracts. Of course, this isn't non-renewing any contract, it's reducing the term of the contract. So it relates kind of indirectly to that, but and the assessor can probably speak better as in regards to the numbers, but I think it was around 750,000.
Yeah, no, I was more talking about the economic numbers that the ag community spends off and exports, and wasn't it approximately $100 million last year? Because that was part of this. Sorry, being in this seat now, I don't have the opportunity to flip through the papers and do my homework on the fly.
No problem, we'll get you exactly what you need. So you're speaking on page 35 of the packet is the 2012 Lassen County Annual Crop and Livestock Report. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
So
I think there's the last 5 years included.
And this was included, however, of course, it's not our document.
Greg is in the audience.
So,
Yeah, I have it right here.
okay, so, actually, we have a better person to speak about the.
Okay, fair enough, yeah,
Want to do that?
sure. Thank you.
Any other questions from you then?
Any other board members have any questions? Thank you. So we'll open it up to the
You would like Craig,
audience.
you want Craig to address the clerk report?
Sure, thank you. I believe, yeah. You should state your name.
Greg Hemphill, Lassen County Ag Department,
Yeah.
on board.
Nice.
Last 10 years comparative production values for 2012 and 2011 were at 101 million. And in 2010 it was 74 million, in 2009 it was 69 million, 2008 it was 91, and then roughly anywhere between 65 and $70,000 for the previous years going back. But the last 2 years we've been at 101 million for production values in Lassen County.
I think it's important for the public, the general public, that maybe doesn't see the ag reports, to get to know just how, exciting those figures are for local industry. I mean, the last 5 years, it's about $500 million. That's big money, and I'm aware that, most of that money, is exported out of the county, and it's new dollars coming in, so it's something that, I commend the ag community for, and I think, sometimes that side of the Williamson Ag story, gets left out, so I just wanted to make sure for this go around that it's, included. Thank you.
Want to see if I hear calling too. Next in order, we see if any of your colleagues have staff questions and staff.
He asked us already, and we all said no.
Okay.
I was ahead of you.
Kenneth Bunch, Lassen County Assessor. I apologize to the audience and board. I'm meeting 11:15 today. My Chief Appraiser, Dan Sleater, will be here for any discussion that needs to be done, either from the board or individually with property owners. Some questions came up at the last meeting when we spoke about Williamson Act. I wanted to give some answers to that. Contracts, currently there are 170 contracts on 331,000 acres. Those are what I consider active contracts. There's another 25 contracts that are in non-renewal. There are about 2,800 contracts there. It's about 11,000 contracts where the Prop 13 value was lower than the Williamson Act restricted value. 11,000 acres by 9 contracts, 50 parcels. Interpreting the crop report of the $101 million in gross product produced, 12 million of that would be timber, so that does not relate to the Williamson Act. That's in a timber preserve tax benefit program. Of the what we call prime acreage, the highly productive ground in the county, the Ag Commissioner's report shows about 71,000 acres. Less than half of that's in a Williamson contract. When you look at the range grazing, it shows about 1.2 million acres are in the report as pasture range. About 25% of that land is in the Williamson Act. When you follow where we send the tax bills as an indication of where the property owners live and perhaps spend their money, 60% of the tax break goes to addresses outside of Lassen County. And that's not, a totally true indicator that all those people don't visit here, spend money here, to try to mitigate that effect of, misrepresenting the numbers. We left the town of Aden out of the numbers. A lot of people, it's right on the border. So some of the people that get the mail in Aden live in Modoc County. Some that have contracts probably live in in Lassen County. Basically, that's it. I mean, today's hearing is really about 1265. It's a program that the Farm Bureau initiated. They initiated the bill. We've done it for the last 2 years. Representatives of that community in the past before the board have never asked the board not to implement it. Perhaps today's input will be different. Any questions from the board?
I have a couple of questions.
A little history, Ken. When was 1265 Sunshine? Is it this year?
January 2016, so what we're talking about today is the bill that comes out in October
When did you
2014.
guys bring it?
When did it
So you
start?
said sunset would be,
Sunset.
Not Sunset.
when it started.
Yeah, when
Okay.
did it start?
It was first available for the 2010 tax roll, but we did not implement it. We did for the 2011 and 2012.
So
I'm
there's a
sorry, I
history.
got that wrong, sorry. We did for 12 and 13. Right now, we're talking about 14.
Right.
Yeah, so it would have been the 11. You talk about, you do it all in 10 for the 11, so I got a year off.
So we've implemented this 1265 for the last 2 years, is what
Yes,
you're
sir.
telling me?
Yes.
So they've already lost 20% of their tax dollars? I mean, they've
The tax savings, yeah, they kept 90%, lost 10%.
I had a few questions, just to review a bit of some past knowledge I have, but also for the benefit of the audience. So, the contract holders still do pay property tax. I think that's maybe a bit of a misconception. I know, the first year I sat on the board, I sort of got hammered, if you will, by a few people out in the business community asking me why do I think I need to subsidize agriculture? And I said I don't really think of it as a subsidy. I think of it as incentivizing agriculture. But in any case, that some people think that their property taxes are waived. But so maybe you could just explain a little bit.
Under
about-
under California law, a person that has a Williamson Act contract is assessed the lower of either the restricted Williamson Act calculated value on the land, which is a heavily dependent formula type of a law that estimates net income from renting the property and uses a capitalization rate that's tied to long-term treasury bonds. It really has nothing to do with current ag as far as the cap rate goes. They get that value, they get the lower of either the restricted Williamson Act contract, Proposition 13 value, or current market value.
Upon which they pay property tax.
Right, and of course they pay property tax. For the better ground, I would estimate it's about a 30% tax break. On the worst ground, like the range ground, it's more like an 80%. But because everybody's got a different Prop 13 value, there's no standard. It depends if you have the value way back in 1975 or if you bought it last week.
Okay. So there's a couple ways the tax rate's established, but is it fair to say that they kind of look at what the land's gonna be capable of producing? Is that playing into this?
What you'd be able to rent the land for to a valid operator. People's individual tax breaks under 1265 are very easy to calculate. You just look at the part on the tax bill that's identified as the 1265 charge. And it's basically 10% of what the tax savings would be.
Okay, so, and you kind of answered the foregone property tax that's mentioned, so basically, foregone property tax would be described as approximately, like you said, 30% on the better land.
No, they basically legislated that, they created a new term, foregone taxes.
Okay.
And what they do, they reach into the county's proportional share of the total property tax, which is commonly known as the 88 formula, something the auditor comes up with. and it assumes that that's correct for Williamson Act land, but it's not. You know, overall, the weighted average, the county share is 20% of the total taxes collected. But these Williamson Act contracts are not in the incorporated boundaries of Susanville, and they're typically not in an area where there's a fire district or some other entity sharing the taxes. If you look at the Chico State report, I believe it states pretty much that the tax rate would have been pretty much 35% county share in those rural areas that are not incorporated. So what we're really losing is about 24% of the tax dollar on the land, but this formula per legislation looked at it as 20%.
Okay, so about 20, so if the Williamson Act, if the farmers got no benefit and it was completely squished, then
The county at this point would probably have about another $200,000 in unrestricted
24%.
funds,
24%?
roughly.
So, and then although the state, I know, does not participate with any subvention funding, what role do they still play in the program? Don't they still provide some sort of backfill for the?
None at all that I know of. They do have a policing authority to enforce the contract. It's to the detriment of the property owner. They won't let them build a house if they don't feel that the house is necessary for the operation of the property. That's why some people do actually file a non-renewal themselves, because they like to get their property tax back, property rights back.
They do make up the lost school share through the 88. I think that was.
Not as relates to the Williamson Act, no. That's been part of the AVA formula from the very beginning. It's not.
That's not correct.
Okay, there's a portion subvention money that goes to backfill schools that ties
The
to
school,
Williamson
the
Act.
schools don't have a subvention like the county have, that's not there. What the school has is full funding of
Right.
their apportionment. And the part that they would have otherwise been paid out of the property tax is made up by the fact that the state guarantees the schools, regardless if the money comes out of the
I was
property
looking at it
tax
from the
pool
general
or-
fund aspect.
And in that respect, there,
That would be correct.
20% that the county would get out of the property tax pool is lost. There's another roughly 10% when you add the city share of the property tax pool and the various special districts. And the city share is roughly around 7%, and the districts gain about 3%, which means the remaining 70% of the property tax is basically school funding. So when you pay your property tax bill, for every dollar that's paid, 20 cents comes to the county, 10 cents goes to the city and the various districts, and 70 cents goes to the school. Well, the fact that we have the property tax savings to the farmers, to the ag folks, okay, means that 70 cents that they would otherwise be paying that would go to the schools, what would happen is if we abolish the contracts in its entirety, you know, sure, we get our $200,000 that the farmers would have to pay, and the city and the districts would get their roughly $100,000 share. But there would be an additional $700,000 being paid into the property tax pool that would go first to reduce the state obligations for education. So by us giving up our $200,000 share is a way to get the state to put $700,000 back into the pockets of our ag community. So there is a direct benefit there, because the schools don't get shortchanged.
I fully agree with that. I was responding to the 200,000 in the general
Well,
fund.
my question.
Another
Yeah,
item that's missing is bond payments. There's no contribution to pay off school.
I knew the state was still involved, and unfortunately, I didn't grab I got a Williamson file this thick, there are no, but so even though there's no subvention monies, they still play a role in the Williamson.
They help fund the schools.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Well, they
it's
pass-
not a question
they
of how
pass the
much
liability
schools-
onto the-
they
onto
fund-
the state to
They
pay.
fund the schools. I mean, it's not a question of helping, they fund the schools. The question is, where do they get their money to fund the schools?
Right.
It comes out of the general treasury of the state.
Yes.
Now, do they want to claim what would be these lost taxes? So they, you know, as far as they're concerned, there's 70% of the money that is the break to the ag community that is not being generated to offset their expense for schools. They're gonna pay for the school.
But that's not the
regardless.
foregone taxes that I was asked about. Foregone taxes relate to the general fund.
Foregone taxes relates to it all.
Well, not under this 1265.
Well, 1265 is only speaking to the
Right.
county general fund portion.